Paddy Pimblett is fighting on UFC 282 against Jared Gordon, and we're going to question what's next for him if he wins. So, Mark, if he wins, who would you like to see him fight next?
I mean, it's kind of tough because he isn't even ranked, so it almost feels like just pulling a random name out of a hat where you say that would be a good fight, but
Yeah.
in the next breath, him and Jamie Malarkey, I think that would be a good fight as well. I'd like to see that. I'd love to see that fight. I don't know if it's maybe too much of a step up in competition for Paddy right at the moment, but
Yeah.
Jamie Malarkey looked well recently. You know, he had a bit of a stint way back when, but I think that'd be a really good fight, really interesting, especially the size difference. See if Paddy can cope with that. What about you? Is there any fighters in mind for you?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably two options for him. I think the real fight to make is probably Ila Tapora. If Ila Tapora wins against Bryce Mitchell this weekend, I think they've got a bit of history there. You know, they threw the hand sanitizer at each other. They've got in a bit of a fight there, and there's already that built-in storyline, isn't there? There's a bit of aggression between them, and I know Ila Tapora fights up at lightweight. He fought Jai Herbert there, so that's a possible matchup. But I think a great fight would be Brad Riddell. I think that's one that they could both win. Brad's got a good name behind him, and it's something that could really push Paddy up. But the thing is, Paddy doesn't seem interested in fighting high-ranked opponents. He said that he wasn't going to be even looking towards the title picture for 2 or 3 years. So do you think you'd like to see him fight anyone in the top 15?
I mean, it's tough because it's just because of the hype behind him, and you know, it doesn't help that he's pushed the co-main event on this card. But when you constantly hear about someone, you presume, oh right, well, why don't you fight the top ranked guys and things? You're like, this just proves popularity really does count for a hell of a lot. The guy isn't even ranked. It's like Sean O'Malley, you know, name another millionaire who's unranked, apart from Bruce Buffer, you know. But it's true, you know, like he's just building this name, and you don't blame him. But as a greedy fan, you typically want to see him, you know, go for the higher rank because you want to see him have a real tough test. But it makes sense for him. You've just got to sit and just go, you know what? Let's look at it objectively. He's still young. He's working his way through. He's still relatively new to the UFC. He's had a handful of fights. They've been exciting, but again, you just want to see that step up in competition. I think it's natural for a fan to want that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's two paths for it, isn't there? You can slowly build yourself up the way Paddy and O'Malley have, or you can rush in like someone like Khamzat Chimaev. But again, you need to gain that experience. And I feel like, you know, I don't want to start banging on about Khamzat for ages, but that's where Khamzat falters a little bit, isn't it? It's his experience and his capability to manage his emotions during these fights at these high level moments. And I think if Paddy is going to look at becoming a champion, I think that's a great route for him to slowly push himself up, get that experience he needs in the UFC against these higher level guys, because there's no easy fight in the UFC. Everyone who signed, for the most part, is actually a really good fighter. But do you think Paddy is even... Yeah, apart from CM Punk. He's best in the world, Mark. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But do you think Paddy has any chance of being a champion at all? Do you think he'll ever be at that level?
It definitely does. Everyone has a chance. I mean, it's tough to say right now because we're just going off, you know, the fights that we've seen and his history and, you know, Cage Warriors and things. But you are right. There is two different paths, you know, like say, I don't want to keep banging on about other fighters on this video, but O'Malley, you know, he had Pedro Munoz and then straight away Piotr Jan. You're like, Jesus, that's a step up. And then you look at Alex Pereira, he stormed through everyone, you know, he's done it that way, straight for the kill, you know, gone for bullseye. Whereas Paddy, I mean, end of the day, he's going to do what suits him. And it makes sense business-wise, money-wise for him, all that good stuff. Because why would you, you know, want to go for the, you know, dead set for the championship? It makes sense for him. Because, I mean, imagine if his next fight announced after this one, Dwain, was Islam Makhachev. Like, it just doesn't, like, you'd sit there and you're like, okay, actually now. But fans are never happy though, are they? Like, and it's part and parcel of just watching the internet unfold. When, you know, like if Paddy did do that and he took a complete step up in competition and he fought Charles Oliveira or Islam or something like that, everyone say, no, he's got no chance in hell. You're like, I know it's one extreme or the other, like, but are you either happy or you're upset?
Yeah, you're 100% right there. People are fuming no matter what. Oh, he's purposely dodging people, and then if he gets a big fight, oh, there's too much favoritism. I don't feel like he can win. But if he did fight Islam, that'd be a good bet. I'd put a bet on Paddy just in case. It's near impossible, but I'd put the bet on nonetheless. I think perhaps Paddy probably could one day be champion at the UFC. I think he's going up this. He's got a great path towards it. He's taking some good fights. He's gaining experience. Don't forget, he's been a world champion before at Cage Warriors, so he knows what these high-pressure fights are like, and he's got a huge name. And I know that shouldn't come into it. I know champions should just be based off who's the best fighter, but unfortunately, that's not the way it works in the UFC, because UFC is a sport, and yet it's an entertaining sport. It's basically WWE, but real. So they are just going to push people who do have big names. And so I think Paddy is in line for that title shot. But Mac, if he does lose to Jared Gordon this weekend, do you think that derails the hype train and that's it's over for Paddy in that sense of invincibility, I guess, that sort of all the hype running behind him?
See, I wouldn't have thought so at all, because I'd like to believe that we can look at things sort of objectively and like, all right, he's still young. He's still a young fighter, up and coming. These things are going to happen, and he's still learning. And especially, exactly like you said, then there's no easy fights in the UFC. If he does lose, you never know. It might be like a Kevin Holland the first time he lost. All right, then he just close it back, and he's still that big name. I think there's some people where if Paddy was to lose, they treat him so disposable. Yeah. In the sense of, he's done. He's done. What do you mean he's done? He's still in his 20s. And that's it. And that's his blemish in the UFC. And he's done now, is he? It doesn't quite work like that. But I think the only thing that could play a factor there is in the sense of, we've seen it quite a few times when a fighter loses it, and then it seems to there's something that changes. So it'd be down to him, like the old, it's how you deal with a loss.
Yeah, like a Darren Till kind of guy, he loses a fight and he's constantly chasing it. Yeah, that's 100%. And I think he has lost before, hasn't he, in Cage Warriors? And I think it really motivated him. And some people, they come back even stronger in some ways. And, I think you're right. So many people are just quick to dispose of people after a loss. It's normal to lose. There's very few undefeated fighters in the UFC. I think there's John Jones and Khabib, and there's obviously a few others. But for me, it's not important. If someone loses a fight, it's a small blemish and that's it. It doesn't tarnish your legacy. Like, look at GSP. He got 2 losses and then he beat both of those guys later down the line. And you can fix those mistakes. But I think for Paddy, I'm really excited to see where his career is going to go either way. But I do think that's all we've got time for. Thank you for watching. If you can like, comment, and subscribe, it really does help us out.